The default video editing technique in Photoshop and virtually all other video editing products is to use what are called cut edits, where you go from the end of one clip immediately to the first frame of the next one. There's no sort of gradual shift from one to the next. But sometimes it's nice to have that kind of gradual change, and you do that using a transition. So I'm going to show you how to apply video transitions in this lesson. To follow along, go to Working Files, go to Photoshop PSD Files, then open up 0304 Transitions. This project is exactly 30 seconds long. I've got the keyboard shortcuts turned on here, so if I press the End key, I'll go right to the end of this project, and you'll see that it's 30 seconds long. You look down at the time there, 30 seconds. I set it to 30 seconds for a reason, to show you what happens when you use one of the transitions here inside Photoshop. There's really only one video transition inside Photoshop with two versions of that transition. It's called the crossfade or fade here inside Photoshop. And actually, crossfade is an audio term, not a video term. The proper term here would be cross-dissolve, but they call it crossfade here inside Photoshop. Nevertheless, the way a crossfade works is basically it drops the opacity of one clip as you go to the next clip and then lifts the opacity on the next clip if you use the crossfade. If you just use a fade, then it fades out one clip and then fades up the next one. That's basically the difference. So I'll show you a fade here. I'll take the fade and I'll drag it between two clips. That's how you apply a transition. You go down here, you drag it between two clips. Notice you get a little rectangle there that's centered on the clips. If I drag it left, it'll be at the end of the clip to the left. If I drag it right, it'll be at the beginning of the clip to the right. That means that the one on the left will not fade at all, but the one on the right will. So I'll just do fade between the two of them now, just to show you that, first of all. What happens now is that this first clip will fade out, the opacity will drop, and then the next one will fade up. And the default duration for this transition is 1 second. So it'll be essentially a half a second fading out and a half a second fading up. Let's just see how that works here. I'll go over here and play through that now. And it may not play smoothly because we're playing right off the timeline here, but we'll give this a shot here. Kind of jump there. What happens is that it fades down to transparency, like that, for a half a second, and fades up from transparency. But that's kind of deceiving. It's not really fading down to transparency. This being Photoshop and you have no background layer, when you drop the opacity on something, you see that transparency, that checkerboard. But the thing about video, when you render this, anything that shows transparency will actually end up being black. Always the underlying color for video is black. So despite seeing this transparency here like that, when you're done rendering this, that'll be black. It'll be fading the black and then fading up from black. It starts right there at 420. In the middle of that edit will be 505 or 506, which is 15 frames, which is half a second. Then it goes up here like that, and it's done at 521, essentially, or 520, and that is a full second for that transition. Now I'm going to put the transition in a different place now. So I'm going to go to History here. I'm going to undo that. Go back and add another transition here. I'm going to open the transition and take the fade again. I'm going to put it on the left-hand side here now. Click away. Now you see that it's just going to fade out that clip and then immediately jump to the next one, which is not necessarily a smooth thing to do, just so you know. So if you put it on the left-hand side or the right-hand side, it'll be kind of abrupt. It won't be that nice smooth thing that you probably wanted to see. But that's how a fade works. Let me show you these sort of variations on a theme when it comes to the fade. There's fade with black, fade with white, and fade with color. Fade with black fades down to black and comes back up again, but that's the exact same thing as fade, because when you fade it out, it fades down to the apparent transparency, but in fact it's black. The only time where fade with black is different than fade is if you're fading something on a higher track and you've got a video below it. If you have a video below it, as you fade out here, you're going to see the video below it, and as you come back up again, that video will go away. So it's kind of awkward to use fade when you're on a higher track and you can see what's below it here in a separate video group. So in that case, you definitely want to use fade with black. I'll apply fade with white here. It's simple just to change, just drag it down here, and that'll change the previous transition to this new one. I'll show you how that works. So we'll just fade to white, and then fade back up. And this really is fading to white. It's not fading to transparency or something like that. It will have a dip to white, as they call it in the video parlance. Like that. Which sometimes is kind of a nice way to go. Now, if you want to change the length of the transition, you can just click down here and notice that you get a little trim tool there. The trim tool is not for the clip. That's for the clip right there. But down here, the trim tool is for the transition. You can drag the transition out and make it longer, have it go farther into a particular clip like that. So the transition will now dip down for a half second there, but will be extended much longer on the next clip like that. Do the same thing for the one on the left. So you can make them much longer, like so, a very slow transition. And I could have done that when I applied the transition. So I'm going to click on the transition here like that and press the delete key. I can get rid of it that way. I'm going to go back and apply another transition here. Click on this. And instead of accepting the default duration like that, I can change it to something else. I can type in, let's say, 2 seconds. Say 2 like that. And now I'm going to take fade with color. Drag that down. And what's that all about? Well, here's the little color swatch. When I've got fade with color, I can select the color. Right now it's dipping to gray. I can have it dip to some color. And I can go over here, let's say dip to green or something like that, because it's kind of a green scene. It's not necessarily an appealing thing to do, but we'll show you how it works anyways. Now we'll click away. Now you see how it changes from that to green and goes back again. Sometimes it's nice to have a color that sort of matches the scene when you do a dip to a color like that. That's how that works. Now there's one more transition that I want to show you, and that transition causes things to change a little more drastically than you might expect. I'm going to click on this one and press delete to get rid of it. I'm going to apply one more transition, and that is the crossfade. Now again, crossfade normally is an audio term, but here it's a video term. I'm going to apply the crossfade between these two clips. But before I do that, I want the playhead to be at the end here so you see what happens. So I'm going to press the end key here, put the playhead over here at the end, and you can see that it's right at 30 seconds. Now I'm going to apply the crossfade right here. And what happens with crossfade, it takes the clip here and slides it over so that these clips overlap, so that they'll go from one to the next and you see them blending together. So when you apply crossfade, be aware that you'll shorten your project by the length of the transition. So the transition here is going to be 2 seconds, and so the length of the project will go from 30 seconds to 28 seconds when we apply this, which is not necessarily a good thing, but this is the standard behavior for a lot of consumer-level video editing products. This would not happen in something like Premiere Pro or Final Cut Pro. They would keep the same length. But the reason it automatically shortens your project here inside Photoshop is that the folks in Photoshop are concerned that you may be applying these crossfades to clips that don't have any head or tail frames that can overlap. So then what do? You have no extra frames to overlap. So you need to shorten it so you can make them overlap automatically. So rather than do it only when there aren't enough, it does it all the time. So you just need to be aware of this. When you apply this, you will shorten your project. So if you've carefully laid out your project and now you apply crossfades, you're going to change the timing of your project. So here we go. I'm going to drag it down there, apply it right there between the two, and it's going to shorten this project by 2 seconds. See that? Now the playhead is at 28 seconds instead of 30. We shortened this project by 2 seconds when we applied that. And notice the little transition doesn't go between the clips. It goes on the beginning of the next clip and shows that it's overlapping by the way it kind of lines up there. So now I'm going to play through that, and you'll see that the clips overlap. You'll see they blend together like that, which is a typical way that a cross dissolve, as it's called, normally works, which is fine. Be aware that when you use crossfade, you will change the length of your project, and you'll also change how the edit works. Notice here that we timed this edit very carefully to have them be at a certain place, and then go to the next clip. Well, now that edit point is kind of overlapping, which may not be exactly what you want. You actually may want to take this clip and extend it, make it longer at the beginning so that when they actually do blend together, then the timing will be a little bit better. In any event, that's how you apply video transitions, delete them, replace them, and change their lengths.